We are deep into the most sweltering stretch of July. The thermometer out on your back porch is sitting at 98 degrees at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The sun has been beating down on your deck without mercy for the last 4 hours. Inside the house, your kitchen has climbed to a heavy 86 degrees because you spent the morning putting up jars of peaches, running the stove from dawn right up until noon. The damp sheets hung in the windows are doing their part. Your strategy of shading the south-facing walls is doing its part, but the kitchen is still too stifling to sit in comfortably, and everyone will be coming inside for supper in 20 minutes. You step over to the simple oscillating fan resting in the kitchen corner. The fan connected to the 12-volt solar battery out in the barn, taking almost no power to run. You reach over and grab 2 large, solid frozen water bottles that have been resting in the icebox since dawn. Using a couple of zip ties, you secure them directly to the back of the fan. You switch it on. In just 5 minutes, the heat in that kitchen falls from 86 down to 75. Give it 10 minutes, and it drops to 68. A cool, moving breeze flows over the supper table, just as the family sits down to eat. Those bottles will keep throwing cold air for the next 6 hours. The entire price of this cooling system, outside of the simple fan you already had, is exactly $0. I need to be straightforward with you before we go any further. We have already talked about passive cooling techniques in our video on how to cool any room by 15 degrees for free, damp sheets in the window frames, retreating to the cellar during the day, the daily rhythm of night ventilation and day sealing, strategic shade, and the Zier pot for steady, slow cooling. Those practices will carry most homes through the bulk of the summer. But there are certain weeks in July and August when even the wet sheet strategy is not quite enough. Heat waves breaking 100 degrees for days on end, moments when the kitchen absolutely must be tolerable for canning food, when the family living space needs to be chilled before people go to sleep, or when one particular room simply demands more relief than passive practices can offer. For those difficult weeks, the technique I am about to show you is what will actually get you through. This approach is effective because it simply brings 3 elements together: a basic oscillating fan to push air across the space, 2 large frozen bottles of water that pull heat out of the air as it moves past them, and a specific trick using salt that most people have never been taught, which keeps those bottles colder for much longer than regular water ever could. Your total upfront cost, assuming you already have a fan and some empty bottles, is nothing. If you have to go purchase a small oscillating fan, you might spend $20 to $40 just once. The frozen bottles will easily last 5 to 8 hours every time you freeze them. You can place them back in the freezer each night. You can run this exact setup on every blistering day for the next decade, and you will never have to pay a single cent to run it again. Our farmhouse does not have a central air conditioning system. It never has. For generations, farming families have endured summers exactly like this one by relying on the traditional practices we talk about on this channel. Today, I am going to walk you through the active cooling method that works hand in hand with our passive routines. We will cover the basic chemistry of why it functions, the salt trick that doubles its effectiveness, the simple 5-step process to build it, an honest look at what this setup can and cannot achieve, and the crucial little details that mean the difference between a cooling fan that works perfectly and one that just leaves a puddle of water on your floor. By the time this video is over, you will know exactly how to set up an ice bottle fan that costs you nothing to build, but delivers true, noticeable cooling to any individual room in your home. Now, let us get plainly into the chemistry, the salt trick, and the actual build. The honest physics behind why this method works is straightforward. When your fan pushes warm room air over the frozen bottles, heat transfers from that air directly into the ice. The air that moves past the bottles comes out several degrees cooler than when it hit them. The fan then pushes that chilled air across the room, and the oscillating sweep disperses it over a much broader area than a stationary fan ever could. As the ice slowly melts over the next several hours, it keeps pulling heat out of the flowing air. The temperature in the room drops in a way you can clearly measure. It is true heat transfer through basic chemistry. There is no magic here, and no fabrication. The core principle is this: cold transfers from a chilled surface into warm air. The larger the cold surface area the air touches, and the longer that air stays in contact with it, the more heat is removed. Strapping two 1-liter bottles to the back of a fan gives you roughly 10 to 12 square inches of cold contact space for every cubic foot of air moving past per minute. That exact ratio is what allows you to bring the temperature down by 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit in a standard 12 by 1 5-foot room in just 10 to 15 minutes. Think about how a standard window air conditioning unit works. It uses grid electricity to run a compressor that performs this exact same function on a larger scale. The AC condenser sits outside your house, pulling warm air across coils pumped full of refrigerant. That refrigerant sucks up the heat, and cool air is blown back inside. It is the exact same fundamental principle, just with entirely different machinery and a drastically different electric bill. Running a central air conditioner will cost you anywhere from $150 to $300 a month during the peak of summer. This fan and bottle setup costs practically nothing to operate. Now for the salt trick, the simple chemistry that makes these bottles twice as effective. This is the step most folks simply do not know. When you mix salt into the water before you freeze it, you alter the chemistry of the resulting ice in a way that is perfect for cooling applications. Pure water freezes at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. When it starts melting, it jumps right back to 32 degrees the moment it turns back to liquid, reaching room temperature just an hour or two after leaving the freezer. Salt water behaves entirely differently. Adding salt lowers the temperature at which water freezes. In physics, this is called freezing point depression, and you will find it documented in any standard science textbook. The dissolved salt molecules interfere with how the ice crystals form, meaning the water must drop to a much lower temperature before it can turn solid. Here is the exact recipe to use for a 1-liter bottle. Dissolve exactly 1/4 cup of ordinary table salt into the bottle of water before freezing. Shake the bottle well so the salt mixes completely. Then put it in the freezer. The result is that the freezing point of that salt water mixture plummets to roughly 25 to 28 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on your exact salt mixture. A standard home freezer running between 0 and 10 degrees will freeze that saltwater block all the way down to 10 or 15 degrees. What you get is a bottle that is significantly colder than plain frozen water could ever be. But even more importantly, as that saltwater ice melts, it holds its cold for a much longer period. The brine solution that forms stays well below 32 degrees through the entire melting cycle. While pure water ice turns to 32-degree water and warms up steadily, the saltwater ice ensures the air blowing off those bottles stays chilled for the entire 2 to 3 hours it takes to melt. Not just in the early stages. Practically speaking, plain water bottles give you about 4 to 5 hours of decent room cooling. Saltwater bottles will cool your space effectively for 6 to 8 hours. It is the exact same fan and the exact same room, with just a 1/4 cup of salt added to each bottle before freezing. I must be precise about the amount of salt. 1/4 cup per 1-liter bottle is the exact right measurement. If you use less, you will not get enough of a freezing point drop. If you use 1/3 of a cup or more, your home freezer might not get cold enough to freeze the bottle solid, leaving you with useless slush instead of a hard block of ice. 1/4 cup is the sweet spot. Now, let us go through the 5-step build, plainly and simply. Step 1. Collect your materials. You will need an oscillating fan, either a standing model or a table fan that has a removable front grill. The specific size or style is not terribly important. A smaller 1-2-inch table fan does fine for one person sitting in a chair, while a larger 1-8-inch standing fan can handle a whole room. The method is the same for both, just with different cooling power. You also need 2 1-liter plastic water bottles. Make sure to get the slightly larger 1-liter size, not the small single-serving bottles. A 1-liter sports drink or water bottle works perfectly, as long as it is clean and BPA-free, which most food-grade plastics are today. You need 4 to 6 zip ties. The color does not matter. You will use 2 or 3 per bottle to strap them to the fan. You need 1/4 cup of regular salt for each bottle. Standard table salt, sea salt, kosher, or pickling salt all do the exact same chemistry. Finally, grab a small towel or absorbent cloth to set beneath the fan. Condensation will form on the melting bottles and drip, and this catches the water. Total cost, assuming you own the fan and the bottles, is $0. Buying a new fan sets you back roughly $20. One time. Step 2. Mix your salt water and freeze the bottles. Fill every 1-liter bottle with water, but be sure to leave about 1 inch of empty headspace at the top. This is critical because water expands as it turns to ice. If you fill it to the brim, the bottle will split open in the freezer. Pour your 1/4 cup of salt into each bottle, screw the cap on tight, and shake it hard for 2 to 3 minutes until every bit of salt is dissolved. You should not see any crystals resting at the bottom. Put the bottles in your freezer for at least 12 hours, or simply overnight. Salt water takes a bit more time to freeze than fresh water, so 12 to 18 hours guarantees a solid freeze. Once they are ready, they will be hard blocks of ice at roughly 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Step 3. Take off the front grill of your fan. Always unplug it first. Do not ever work on a fan while it is plugged into the wall. Look at the front face. The plastic grill is usually held on by small clips or a few screws. Find those, undo them, and take the grill off. Set it out of the way and look at the back side of the fan. You will notice the back housing behind the blades has vent slots for air to pull through. This is exactly where we will attach the bottles. Step 4. Strap the frozen bottles to the back of the fan using your zip ties. You want to position both bottles upside down on the back of the fan, so the narrow necks face the floor and the wider bottoms face up. This upside down position is important because it keeps the heavy part of the bottle centered against the housing so it does not tip forward. Thread 2 zip ties around what is now the bottom, the narrow neck, and weave them through the vent slots or wire framing on the back of the fan. Pull the zip ties through the vents, around the neck, back out the vents, and pull them tight. This next part is vital. Make sure neither bottle is touching the fan blade. The blade spins right inside that housing, and if a bottle sits too close, it will rub against the blade, ruining both your fan and the bottle. You also need to test that the fan can still oscillate smoothly. If the bottles block the turning mechanism, the fan will stay stuck. Adjust them if you need to. Step 5. Put the front grill back on, lay down your towel, and turn the power on. Clip or screw the grill back into place. Lay your towel on the floor or table right under the fan to catch the condensation. Turn the machine on to its highest speed. Let it run for 5 or 10 minutes. You will feel the chilled air almost right away. Point the fan directly at the spot you want cooled, or turn on the oscillation to sweep the whole room. In 15 to 20 minutes, the temperature of that room should fall by 10 to 15 degrees from where it started. Now, let me pause. Because this is where we talk about honest expectations, what this method absolutely will do. It will cool a single 12 by 5 foot room by 10 to 15 degrees. It will last 5 to 8 hours for each pair of bottles, and it costs $0 to run aside from the tiny bit of electricity for the fan. What this method will not do. It will not cool down an entire house. It cannot match the sheer output of a window air conditioning unit. It is not meant for constant 2-4-hour cooling, and it does not replace the passive cooling methods from our previous video for everyday comfort. The honest reality is that this is a supplementary tool. It is for those peak summer weeks when one room demands more relief than passive cooling can give. It is for days spent canning when the kitchen needs to be bearable. It is for chilling the family room for an hour before bed on a stifling night, or making a hot afternoon workshop or sewing room comfortable again. It is small, targeted cooling, not whole house climate control. Let us look at the honest math. A basic 1-2-inch oscillating fan runs $20 to $40 brand new. The bottles cost maybe a couple of dollars, or nothing if you reuse them. A bag of salt is $2 and easily lasts all summer. Your total one-time cost is under $50. Compare that to a window air conditioner. $200 to $500 to buy, plus another $30 to $50 a month in power, adding up to hundreds of dollars every single summer. This fan setup pays for itself in just 3 weeks and runs for free every year after. There is also immense value here for off-grid families. A window AC pulls a heavy 8 to 15 amps of continuous current, which puts a massive strain on solar and battery systems. This little fan pulls less than a single amp. The ice does the heavy lifting, and making ice costs nothing as long as your freezer is running. The truth is, there is no profit for the air conditioning industry to teach people that a $2 fan and some frozen salt water can cool a room just as well as a $2 AC unit during the hardest parts of the day. There was massive profit in selling homes, expensive units, central air setups, high monthly power bills, and yearly repair fees. So, this simple, older way of doing things stayed quiet, surviving in farm kitchens and off-grid homesteads. Meanwhile, most families pay hundreds of dollars for what $20 and some salt could have done better. You can be the family that never pays. So, here is what I would like you to do this evening. Dig out a fan you already have, or grab one from the hardware store. Save 2 1-liter plastic bottles from this week's groceries. Fill them with water, drop a 1/4 cup of salt into each, shake them well, and put them in your freezer. Tomorrow afternoon, right at the hottest part of the day, take those solid bottles out, zip tie them to the back of your fan, lay a towel down, and flip the switch. Measure the room's temperature before and after with a thermometer. See for yourself what these frozen saltwater bottles can actually do for your specific room for the rest of the season. Refreeze the bottles every single night. Rely on this setup when the room gets too hot for passive methods alone. Keep track of how much money you save by leaving your central air turned off during those peak afternoon hours. Tell me down in the comments, have you ever used the frozen bottle method before? And which room in your home gets the most unbearable in the summer? Also, if your parents or grandparents had their own tricks for cooling down rooms back in the day, whether it was hanging wet sheets on the window line, napping down in the basement, or crowding into that one corner of the parlor that always stayed chilly, please share those family memories. These inherited, quiet ways of staying cool are exactly the kind of wisdom that vanishes when no one bothers to write them down. I read every single comment. As for the next video, since today was all about active cooling for the worst heat waves, our next one will guide you through 7 cold summer meals our family eats when the kitchen is just too hot for a fire. We will look at traditional hot weather eating that requires absolutely no oven, no stove, and no heat added to the house. You can eat incredibly well without cooking your kitchen, even on days when the fan and bottle setup is working overtime. Subscribe so you are here for it. Until next time, find a fan, hang on to 2 bottles, mix in a 1/4 cup of salt, let them freeze overnight, strap them to your fan, put a towel down, and remember that the exact same physics principles taught in school can make a kitchen perfectly comfortable on the hottest afternoon in July for the cost of a bag of salt and 15 minutes of your time. That is exactly how careful older generations survived brutal summers, long before Central Air sold them relief by the monthly bill. And that is how it is still done in any home that bothers to remember.